Welcome back, everyone. I am so excited for today's interview. I am really excited because we're going to dabble in genre we have not yet discussed on here. And it's going to be really interesting because we're talking about lit RPG. This particular author has over thousands of reviews and ratings. He's been on numerous number 1 best-selling lists. And I just want to dive straight into it because prior to hopping on here, we were just talking about how he went from veteran to author. We are talking to the one and only Michael Chatfield. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me, Kia.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to know where it started for you. We were just discussing a little bit. So can you take us back to the start then? Why did you start writing?
So I was kind of doing it for fun, for a period of time. As you start off with all of this, like you're writing a book because you're like, this would be fun. I want to share this with people. But then you actually just keep it to yourself, and then you finally get to a point where you go, okay, enough is enough. I've got to go release this. I was in the army for a period of time, and while I was in there, I was kind of like, you know what? If I'm not going to do it now, when am I going to do it? So I released a book, and as you said, it was kind of jumping on the back of the beast of I thought that I would release a book, it wouldn't do very well, and then I would just fall off of it, and things would happen. But it started happening where I was doing army at the same time to pay off my debts, and then I started to make more money by writing, and then it was actually like, okay, so I might go and do this as a job. And then that finally transformed over, and now I get to write all the time, which is crazy because my browser history must be very interesting to the NSA out there, as we always talk about as authors. So it's been super fun, but yeah, that's how I got it.
That's amazing. So you've been publishing now for the last 7.5 years. When you did publish that first book, how was the process for you? Because you're indie published, correct?
Yeah, correct.
So
Yeah.
how did you
Uh,
go?
yeah. So I think it was I went with what I call the shotgun blast at the time of like I tried everything and everything and anything. Sorry, words ran the wrong way. Uh, but yeah, I tried everything and anything. I did Goodreads, I tried BookBub, I tried newsletters, everything to see what was going on. But I did it in kind of a concentrated one of like I would see how it would work for 3 months. And then anything that didn't work on the second or third release, then I would not do that again. Because especially at that time, it's funds are very limited and your efforts have to be very concentrated in a few focused areas. Like I was only doing Facebook at the time. I don't even think I was touching Twitter because I just knew that I wasn't that good with social media platforms. So I needed to learn one before I did anything else. But then, yeah, as it goes, is you learn one thing and then you're like, okay, I've got this just under wraps. And then you add another thing on and you're like, what have I done? Why did I do this to myself? And then you add another thing and it's like, okay, yeah, it never ends.
And the thing too with your books are they are not small. Your books are like 700 pages plus. So how long does it take you to write a book?
Um, it depends really on it. Like it depends also like what kind of genre it's in and like what's happening in the book. Because like when you have like a big battle scene, a big fight scene, if it's between a couple of people, you can do that rather quickly. But if you're doing like a larger one where it's like, you got hundreds of people involved or thousands of people involved, then you're like, okay, so if I do this, how does that happen? And then there's a lot of technical parts. So that could take a long time. Usually a book. Okay, so a monster that's like as my friend Lucha Malenko says, the chunkers, kind of using the cat analogy, when it is mega chunker, super chunker, and such. Um, I would say 300,000. That probably takes around uh 4 or 5 months, depend, because I find that as they get bigger, it actually takes longer to do. Whereas books that are like 100,000 words, because they're more contained and there's less stuff you have to like, there's a lot of plot that'll go into 300,000. But if it's 100,000, you can kind of really concentrate it and get that out in, say, a month or so.
And I agree with that because I think too when you have like 300,000 words, you kind of lose pace with it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously that's why you edit and read it again, because then you can go, oh, okay, it's not as slow as you thought it was, or there wasn't bits that you were missing. It's all there. It's just because you kind of forget as you're writing, because you literally are moving from scene to scene. Are you able to tell us what is the definition of lit RPG?
Okay, so it's interesting. I kind of my understanding of lit RPG, and everyone says this, is lit RPG is basically you've written a book with game-like elements and like a numerical way of them, of your characters or the world or something leveling up. So you actually have like a stat sheet like you have in D&D. So where it says like your agility has gone up by one, your strength has gone up by one, and you actually show that. Um, that is lit RPG. Whereas Gamelit is kind of the softer version of that, where it's not so many of the crunchy numbers and such, but it has a game-like system into it, and it shows that there's progression, but maybe it's not like you've got a stat sheet, it's not physically represented, it's just mentioned that you've become stronger over time, right?
So I find this really interesting because I am somewhat familiar with the genre, but in the sense of anime and manga. So for an
Mm-hmm.
example, this is Sword Art Online. I don't know if you are an anime watcher, but yeah. So I find it very interesting to funnel that into a book, because I wonder how that would come across, because there's so many elements that need to be involved, as well as the world building and how you would market that, because it's a very, I imagine, a niche market.
Yeah, so it's quite complicated for marketing it. It's rather pain, because when you've got like say fantasy, well, you've probably seen it where you've got, with romance, and then you've got urban romance, fantasy, and like those subgenres and stuff. The more niche it gets, sometimes the better, sometimes the harder, because especially if it's a niche that has a lot of people in it. Like romance is a very heavily populated area. There's a lot of brilliant authors in there, and so it makes it a very competitive space. We have the same thing with Lit RPG, but we don't have a moniker for it. We're hoping that we get one in September, because that's usually when Amazon updates it, and it has been officially recognized as a genre. But it means that we kind of use in the gaps. And I think it's kind of similar to what romance has done in the past, where it's okay, well, it's romance, yes, and they'll use that as a category, and they'll go, well, it's also science fiction based, and so they'll use that as a secondary category. And it's by like association. It's kind of like a Venn diagram a little bit. So we'll use stuff like cyberpunk or D&D related, and or movie adaptations and video game adaptations to try and work it there. But it's a lot of playing around with categories, and a lot of just messing around with advertising and tweaking the system. Yeah.
Because I think too, it would be hard. Like, say, for example, if you're advertising on Facebook, and I say I imagine because I've never marketed this genre, but a lot of it, you could definitely blanket it as fantasy or science fiction. But then people may come and be like, oh, I'm not sure on this genre, like, or I'm not sure on this, I haven't. So it would make it very difficult. But also on the upside, having those niche categories means that realistically there is less competition, I would hope, which helps, like, rankings and stuff, which is super awesome.
Yeah, it definitely does help, and it makes you really have a look at the back end of the system. Like KDP Rocket, which I think has been called something else now, or Publisher Rocket, I think it is now. Like using that could be super useful and super important. And also knowing the other people in the genre, so that you can know, okay, where are they showing up as well, because you want to kind of position yourself in there. Yeah, it's messy. There's a lot of different strands with it, but then you really, it's time in, right? It's like the time that you spent going through the system and figuring it out, and then you're like, okay, that was a lot of time, but at least I know it all now.
Yeah. And where do you meet fellow authors within this genre?
Online, obviously in today's world, but DragonCon, that was the first convention I went to, because I started off in science fiction. I didn't realize that science fiction is usually quite spread out community. It's become closer, and it's been 7 years since I started, so it's in that time period. But then with LitRPG, there's a lot of people running around and doing stuff. So yeah, we met up at DragonCon, and that was my first exposure to it. Yeah, ran into Dakota Kraut and James, became fast friends with them. Ran into actually quite a few people, yeah, like Luke Chemelenko, who I found out lived down the road from me. Which was, so it's interesting of those things that you figure out afterwards, and then it's like, okay. And but I would also say to anyone that wants to write or is writing, get to know the people who write in your genre. First of all, because it's nice to have people to talk to who are doing the same crazy things. And it also is a great support network because there's not many people doing these things around you in your city and such. So having that international community is huge. Plus, there's a lot of things that they'll tell you about that you won't think about. Like audiobooks for me was not something I had on my radar until I was told about it by a friend, and then it was like, okay, well, like here's some audiobooks. Like I bet you yourself have got a bunch of stories of like running into other people and getting that kind of stuff and being like, okay, this is really, I didn't think about this, right?
And that's like, and honestly, that's the whole point of this channel. I've met so many amazing people and learnt so many things, which if I
Hmm.
didn't put myself out there in the first place, I would never gain that knowledge and make those friendships. So I find it interesting that you mentioned cons as well. I imagine you sell really well there, because we have a similar one called Supernova in Australia, which is mostly anime, manga, gaming. I'm a nerd. And yeah, so you do like cosplay and stuff like that. It's really, really fun, but it does well because, obviously I sell fantasy. So I imagine you do really well at those conventions as well.
Um, Not really. And that's on myself. My problem I like to go to conventions to meet the fans. That's the main reason I go there. I also get to hang out with friends, which is great, and it's good fun for that all. But the like for actually selling and such, I find it can be rather complicated. Like I live in Canada, right? And so going down to Dragon Con in Atlanta, there's a lot of technical things that go on behind the scenes, like getting your books there, having a booth set up, making sure it's manned all around all hours and stuff. So usually what you would do is like, group together with other authors to make sure that, there's someone there always selling your stuff. Um, and yeah, like I found that I was spending more time in the booth than I was doing other stuff. So I tend to actually just go straight for the panels, because then I get to hang out with people that I may not have met before, doing different things, getting to talk about crazy subjects, and then also the fans can find me. I'll be like, hey, I'll be here on whatever time or date, and come find me. I'll be there. Come grab a drink, and we'll just hang out for a bit and talk nerdy books. Because yes, I am a nerd too, and I love conventions as well. And the best and the worst part is that I start going around the conventions, and then I go, oh, that's a nice picture, and then I start picking up art and stuff, and I'm like, this would be a great cover, like those kind of fun things as well. So I want to do that part as
Yeah.
well of it.
I think that makes it the hard part, because I am known for when I go to signings that I kind of steal like everyone's chocolates and candies from their table, because I'm kind of like, this is fun, this is fun. And I always have my phone on me, because my sister will be like, Kaya, you have readers at your table. I'm like, I'm coming back. Like, I'm super excited that you're kind of like a child yourself. You want to say hello to all your friends. You want to hang out with everyone and, check out all their goodies. So
Mhm.
it's hard. It's hard doing both. Tell me about one of the books that did grab my attention was your 10 Realms series. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So Ten Realms is well, anime. So Portal Isekai. Two guys transported basically to a fantasy world. They come from a military background, and it's into a cultivation slash fantasy world. I just found it really cool. Of like I was reading like Eastern cultivation and Western fantasy, and I was like, can I make those two things work together? And then I could. So I was like, cool, let's do that. And then I was like, now let's have like someone who's juxtaposed to that kind of system come into it and see what would happen. And so instead of it being like this kind of lone ranger kind of thing, it was, what if two guys who were always intrinsically part of a team went and tried to like was dropped in the middle of this, and let's see what happens. And then that's basically it.
Wow. And that now has, I think we're up to part 8, are we?
Yeah, like it's interesting because the problem was you know how we were talking about big books? The problem was these books got too big. There was one that I think was like 600,000 words long, and I was like, I think I need to cut this in half. There's like a printing limit of like 888 pages on Ingram, I think it is. And so I was like, okay, I can't do this because it was like 1,400 pages or something. I was like, yeah, this doesn't, I couldn't even print the damn thing. So I was like, okay, let's cut this in half. And I did that to 2 books. So it's like we're going to the Seventh Realm Part 2, which is the 9th book, which is incredibly frustrating for anyone that has OCD. So I'm sorry about that.
Amazing, I love it. I do want to talk about, I did notice too that the first book in that series, you've done a couple of re-editions. So I do want to discuss the importance sometimes, because I've done the same thing, whether it's recover, going back through and re-editing, why you decided that was important to do for that book or the series.
Yeah, it depends really on a couple of factors. Like I would say also like if you have a series out for a long period of time and it hasn't, what happens is usually it doesn't get as much TLC as the one that you're releasing right now, right? What I also found is, as you go along, you'd be like, okay, I want to fix this thing. It'll be something in the back of your head of like, I know exactly the little thing I need to change here, and that'll make a huge difference. Or sometimes it is, oh, you know what? My quality of editing has really gone up and I want to change that. Now, the caveat is that don't do this for everything and don't do it all the time. Because we've both seen it of like the editing spiral, right? There's it happens where people will start writing, then they'll start editing, and then for some people who can like write chapter 2 and then edit chapter 1, that is amazing. I'm so like I don't know how you do that. But for most people, don't do that. Just write the thing, get it out of your way, go write the next thing, then go back to it and clean it up. Make sure that you don't get in that editing spiral. So yeah, use it sparingly as a tool. Like I would say at least like if you finished a series, like wait a couple of years before you go and do that because you're going to gather skills over those couple of years to be able to give it the best thing. And definitely with covers, that's kind of it's really just a refresh of the series, right? It allows it a new life, and it is really just saying, I want to get it to more readers while at the same time, maintaining that content. Because you're saying that maybe the covers aren't meeting with what the genre's changed into now, because that can happen over a couple of years easily.
Yeah. And I think too, you make a good point with the editing too. Like, there will never be the perfect book. Your book will never be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter how many times you go through editing it. And I know a lot of people get into the issue, they do 4, 5, 6 edits, but then by then they're actually like getting rid of a lot of the substance from it. So I think you
Yeah.
need to be comfortable with how many edits you do and leave it at that. Because I have seen the spiral happen. I've seen authors regurgitate new covers every couple of months. And yes, special editions are amazing, but readers will tire of it eventually because it's still the same content. So you just need to keep that in mind. I'd be happy with your product. And as you said, in a couple of years, 5, 6 years, if the market has changed, if the trend has changed, redo the cover, make it fresh again, make it beautiful. But definitely kind of leave as is unless you don't have the confidence in your book and you want to go back and do it, then that's okay as well. I
Yeah,
think.
100%. 100%. I agree totally with everything you just said. Yeah.
Amazing. I want to talk, I'm so glad we agree on so many things. I want to talk about your merchandise page. It's really, really cool. And so I wanted to, because you've got mugs, you've got posters, you've got shirts. I want to know why you wanted to create a merchandise store.
Um, so I wanted to give like readers a way to get something that's associated with the series or even gifting it. My thing was actually more about the gifting part of it because then I could go somewhere and say, hey, I don't have a bunch of books, but I've got t-shirts or I've got mugs or merchandise that's usable. And yeah, it also allowed me to do things like I could do giveaways and I've got mugs, and it's rather inexpensive to start up. And it also is like, okay, well, if you want to have a mug, if you want to have a memento, if you want to have a little thing, is there for people. So basically, like in the few sales that it makes, it usually covers the hosting fees, and that's really all that matters, because then it allows, as it grows, then there's more and more stuff there for people if they want it.
And I think too, like whenever I see merchandise, I think, okay, we're making this book into a bigger world. Like we're bringing it into reality, so people can kind of immerse themselves and be like, oh yeah, I'm wearing this shirt because I'm X character from this book. And I absolutely love that. I live for it.
The one I always see is the Mass Effect one. Like if you go to any con, you'll always see someone with an N7 somewhere or a symbol, and I'm like, yep, I know exactly what you're doing over there. Yeah, so I see it everywhere, and I think they were brilliant with how they did that.
Amazing. I love that. It brings me on to my next question, actually. You have a Patreon page, which I find these very fascinating, only because one, I haven't done it yet because I don't have the time to create it and I'm intimidated by it. But I think they're a brilliant idea because it really keeps the author in control of having another income stream, and also kind of gives their avid readers and fans a little bit before everyone else, which kind of builds a more special relationship and bond. I want to know how you went with making your Patreon page and why you're such an advocate for it.
I kind of like when I started out, I didn't know 100% what it would be. I really discovered it from web novels. So usually there's a whole bunch of translated Chinese, Korean, and Japanese novels into English. And the translators, what they did was they would release a set amount of chapters on whichever site they were using, and then their main place to be was Patreon, because that would allow them to be like basically supported to continue this as a full-time job. And I thought it was a brilliant idea. And I saw that really they were connecting with their fans in a really awesome way. And it also allowed them to give content all the time. I think for me, it was okay, I know that I'm writing this every single day, but people don't really get to see that or be a part of that process. So they get like, like a big jump of, okay, here is the book every single release, and it's a big, thing, instead of like it's like having cake, for birthdays. And then Patreon kind of made it like having coffee and then you have cake, like it's like a donut, right? So it made it every single day you had a little bit to look forward to, especially for like, like a coffee a month. You got to have like 10 minutes of your day every single day where you would read a chapter, and then you get to talk to your friends online and be like, oh man, I really like this one, or why the hell did they do this? And you can have a little bit of banter, which they have a lot of fun with, and I have fun reading it. I don't comment on it too much because I'm like, okay, I can't say anything because there's so many spoilers that are easily done. But for authors, I think it's a great platform to do. Again, the same thing. It holds reader retention for a really long period of time. It gives readers what they want. And the biggest thing is a lot of people are like, well, it's another monetary system, blah blah blah. It's like, well, it's not that you're forcing anyone to do this. It is a completely like you pick the subscription, you pick the subscription level for different kinds of stuff. And if you want to just go for the book, you can go for just the book. It's an add-on, right? And so a lot of people are kind of scared about having these. I guess they see it as like two revenue streams on the same thing. I wouldn't say it is really, especially because the way I do Patreon is that I release the audiobook or the ebook 2 weeks before it actually releases on Amazon. So I'm like, hey, you can grab it here, same price that you would pay for on these other services, sometimes even cheaper when you're looking at Audible. And then they get the full access to it ahead of time. And though most of them they don't rub it in a lot to everyone else. And they're like, hey, yeah, I've read it all. Like, though they're really good about not saying any spoilers, which I'm really thankful for. But yeah, no, I think it's been great, and it's grown year after year after year. I think I've had it for 4 years now. But it is something about constant effort really does reward. And a question I get was, do you see a drop in sales on the series? And don't really. Every single book that's come out in the current series, and I've been using Patreon, my sales have actually increased every time. So I haven't seen a big drop. And even if there was more people reading Patreon compared to Amazon, as long as readers are getting their book, right, then it's good to go.
I think like Patreon could also be viewed even as it is a separate platform, but it is a different marketplace as well. Because I know a couple of friends of mine who are avid readers, and they go through apps that, you know, only a chapter gets released a week or whatever it may be. And I think it also says a lot that Amazon's just released the Vela as well. So they're obviously trying to kind of bring that same notion into it. You know, you'll get this every week or every month. So I think you might have been ahead of the game on that one, which is really cool. So yeah, it worked out.
So, question for you: like, have you worked with Vela? Are you thinking about working with Vela? I guess because it's only US right now, isn't it?
So yes and no. I'm gonna, because I'm Australian, it's not available to us. Which is fine. I'm happy for the US to be the guinea pigs for it. So I'm gonna watch this space, see how fellow friends go with it, and kind of take it from there. I like the idea of it just because it kind of keeps me as a writer more accountable and consistent with my
Mhm.
writing. But I am definitely intrigued to see how it works. I think they'll have to do a lot more tweaking with it. But yeah, it's something I'd be interested in. Have you considered doing it?
I haven't just because of Patreon.
Yeah.
Because of the similarities between them. The only thing that I might suggest to people looking at it is if you can do Vela and then you make like a paid for portion Patreon, and then that's guiding them out of the Vela ecosystem into your ecosystem. And it only has to be $1 or two a month or something of that, but it brings them closer to you because if they're in Amazon, they're not really getting you. It's remember the whole thing with like you the author profile and you do add your author or you get updates and whatever. Have you ever gotten one of those updates from anyone that you've subscribed to?
Is that the follow one on Amazon?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, the big
Uh,
yellow button under the picture.
I only ever get if they have a new release. That is all I get. I'll get an email from Amazon, and are we meant to get more? I
Well,
don't know.
like I know that at least for a long period of time, I have never got an email from anyone that I followed. So I was like, because I would see them, pop up, and be like, okay, so it's out. And then I would go to Amazon and it's out, and I wouldn't get the email from them. I think that's something that they've been working on for like the last year. But we kind of had a bit of a laugh because then one of our friends was like, "Hey, my book's out," and we were like, "Wow, I've got an email from Amazon before you've told me." And then it started to happen a bit more, but it's that kind of system.
And I think too, for those who are watching and are looking into going into indie or are indie authors, I think too it's very clever when you see this as a business. You don't have to put all your eggs in one basket. Like I know a lot of people are Kindle Unlimited. I'm in Kindle Unlimited right now, but we need to remember too that we need to have our own platform and our own space, which is why we really just like having a website newsletter because you own that at any time. Amazon could ban one of your books, Facebook could delete your account. So I think it's really important to have that, as you said, you followed authors, but you're not receiving messages about it because you're relying on somebody else's system and platform. And although Amazon is reliable, I want to say, um, they you don't own Amazon. Like it's not as reliable unless you were doing the work yourself. And also it's a greater income when you're doing that too. And at the end of the day, we love what we do. We love writing, but we're here for a full-time income as well, so we can continue doing what we do full-time.
It seems the places where you can connect the most with your readership are the best places to be. Like what different places are your favorite to meet readers and communicate with readers?
Yeah. So like as in social medias or
Yeah, yeah.
um probably like I love Facebook as much as a lot of people don't, but Facebook I've never had any issues with. I found a lot of my readers and friends from there. But also I am quite enjoying TikTok at the moment. I never wanted to go on TikTok. I was so against it, but look, I love it now. I'm an advocate for it. And so there's a different community around that as well. So I'm a sucker for it. But Twitter, not my field. Instagram, I don't mind, but there's not as much engagement I find over there for me personally. What about yourself?
So I'm not on TikTok, but I'd be really interested to hear how that is for you, because I have heard that that's becoming essentially the new space to be. But yeah, no, I love Facebook. I know, again, I'm the same way. Twitter is like you put posts up there, but it's not that much engagement either. Patreon is where I always am, and now Discord. So I just started working with Discord, and I know a few of my friends, they've done it before, and they say it's awesome because it's really community aspect, and it's really informal. But then TikTok, question mark.
Yes. Okay. So I can ask. Okay. So I'll go over it very basically, and then we can, from what I've learned anyway. But yeah, I went on TikTok probably about 3 months ago. I was very much against it because I was like, it's another social media platform. It obviously has stigmatization around it. But at the end of the day, too, it is content creators, and there's a massive book talk world in there. That's right, hashtag book talk. But it's awesome, and so there's a lot of people like that are earning thousands of dollars every month from it because they've got 10, 15-second videos that probably take them an hour to make. But it's getting out there and it's sharing, and it's a new audience. And I do like to compare it to obviously Facebook and Instagram, same company essentially, same owners. And the thing is like Facebook, when that first came out, that was all organic reach, and then slowly it dwindled down, and hardly anyone sees your posts unless you advertise. Instagram is going into the same, it's dwindling down very slowly, whereas TikTok is still available to organic reach. So you're not paying to advertise that. So I'm thinking in my mind, some views you get 200, others you get thousands. I'm like, those are new people coming across my books possibly for the first time. So I can't see that as being a bad thing. But I can get into the nitty gritties afterwards as to what questions you might have, because I'm like, you need to sign up today.
Yeah, no, because I've seen it. I just haven't, like I've seen it in popular culture and such. I haven't gone into it as much, but I have been hearing about it more and more. And I'm like, I'm asking people about it, but in my group of people, they're like, no, we're just dealing with Discord, which is video game related.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to hear about like TikTok because it's coming from, a different group of authors who are experiencing it as well, which is it's really cool because the cross-pollination stuff I think is hella fun.
Yeah, and the thing is too is like they have obviously after you're in it for a while, the algorithm will realize what your interests are. So you have gamer ones, you have anime and manga, things like that. You can definitely do like cross promotions.
They found you out, haven't they?
they did. I don't know how they found me, but yes, I'm a regular now. But the thing I will warn people about is it is a rabbit hole. So you go into it and you're there for half an hour. Like last night I was going to bed, then before I knew it, I was on TikTok for 45 minutes before I went to sleep. So all in the name of research, of course. But and then before we hopped on here, I made 7 TikToks in like 20 minutes. I was like, oh, better hop on that interview. So it can be time consuming, but hopefully beneficial as well. I hope.
Yeah, and I think it's social media, right? It's made to grab your attention and such. And it's as long as you can use it for you instead of getting it using you, I think is awesome.
Yeah, and I think too, like, and it comes back to the original statement, find the social media that's right for you. As you and I said, we're comfortable with Facebook. We enjoy Facebook. I enjoy the aesthetic of Instagram, which is interesting because recently there was an announcement from, I think it was the president or CEO of Instagram, that they want to soon go to more video created content, which is ironic because that is what TikTok does. But the same thing, like I have a podcast every Sunday. I'm a co-host, and the main host, Jacinta Sullivan, is an advocate for Twitter. She's on there all the time. She has over 20,000 followers, but she's in the Twitter book community. So it is there. It's just not there for me. I don't know how to engage on Twitter. It's never really grabbed my attention because I just enjoy pictures. Like I enjoy the aesthetics. So just find the social media that works for you. And if you don't like creating content, then TikTok might not be for you, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. What you just said there. Find what works for you. There's no one fix all, right? Like whatever works for you and that you can keep on doing, right? Like we've been both doing this for 7 years. It's, if we were to pick something that we don't like, it's usually fallen by the wayside now, or it fell away quickly because otherwise you're driving yourself into a rut energy wise, right?
Yeah, and I think, and you've probably done the same thing. I know, especially when I first started out, I was trying to be everywhere. I have accounts on everything. And then you slowly dwindle it down to the ones that is most authentic to you and the one where you can concentrate your time on without it taking too much away. Because I think there is such a thing as social media fatigue, especially for authors, because we're constantly trying to be involved in our reading community. We want to engage, but it's also very taxing when you have literally tens, hundreds of messages coming in, and sometimes you just want days off away from it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, our job is to write. So we kind of flee all of that and just go, I'm just writing. And it's like the gone fishing sign of the world of like, okay, can I put this up somewhere and then no one can see it? And you're like, okay, well, it's on my front door. Like doesn't work as much as it used to.
Yeah, I actually, speaking of gone fishing for the world, I do want to bring up that you are a world traveler. So you actually travel a lot while you're writing, assumably, I'm hoping you're writing. How does that look for you pre-COVID?
So pre-COVID, usually I spend most of my time in Canada, as the law regulates, and then I leave for periods of time. Like I'm from the UK, so I go see my family in the UK. I've got a lot here, but they're still over there. And then I'll get to be able to go to different conventions, and while I'm at different conventions and different events, I'll maybe stay for a bit longer. For me, it's as long as I've got a computer and a place that I can sit with headphones on. Sound canceling headphones are so nice. And it also is like the international do not disturb sign. And if people don't get that, this is the international do not disturb sign. Stop coming up and tapping people on the shoulder when they're wearing headphones. They don't want it.
I feel like
yeah,
this is like you on a plane or something like that. You're just like, why? Why are you tapping on my shoulder?
well, I go to like workspaces and stuff, and I'll be like working away, and someone will like tap on my shoulder and be like, "Hey, do you want to come to this thing?" And I'm like, "Not now." Like in not in a mean way, but it's just like I was just like you're in the zone, right? Like when you're writing, you've got those precious times when you're like, okay, this is happening, and this is happening, this is happening, and someone says sandwich, and you're just like, no, what? Like, and you pulled out of it, right? But yeah, no, so I get to be able to do that, which is a heck of a lot of fun. It sounds like you've been also traveling and going to other places while you've been on this writing experience as well.
Yeah, I think you're the male version of me, but Canadian. So, but that's why I found it quite interesting was because so it's such a cliche, but I was I was a small country town girl, and then I ended up, I started writing and publishing, and then I was like, oh, there's a bit of a bigger world. I moved to the city, I went into corporate, smashed it, did amazing, and then I thought there must be more to the world than this. And I always kind of put my books ahead of me because I was quite young when I started, so. I didn't have confidence back then. So, but one thing I was confident in was my dream. And so I'd always like place my books in front of me. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to organize a 3-week tour on my own in America. And so I did that, and I did like a signing tour and stuff. And then I was like, okay, I tried to move to the States, didn't work. So I was like, all right, spent a couple of months there. So then I looked on the UK, and it honestly, I didn't realize how big the world was until I went traveling the first time. And I usually travel by myself, and I loved it. And I think there's so much that I put in my books, culturally, scenes, whatever it may be. But it's kind of helped me be the woman that I am today. So, and I wouldn't have done that probably without my book. So it kind of goes hand in hand, I think.
Oh, 100%. It only enriches, right? Like the experiences you have from, going to a spice market in India, right? And have like like the whole smell assailing you and just being like, oh yeah, I have not had that much pepper in my face ever. And like, but experiences of like walking down different streets or like, you know, different cultures and their customs, right? It adds a huge richness because what I would always say is, you know, like if you live a life well, then you can, you know, spread that as well. And it's like experiences are huge, huge to, especially when you're writing books, because otherwise, you know, it'll start to become similar. I think if you don't get those new experiences, and that's not saying that you can't have new experiences within a town, within a city. It means getting out of that comfort zone a little bit.
I like to call that creativity stimulation, I want to call it, because obviously while we're in, you know, I love Australia. Obviously, I'm Australian, but I almost didn't know what to do with myself when I came back after COVID. And so everything's very limited at the moment. I think more so in other countries than Australia at the moment, knock on wood. But so then I started doing things in my local backyard. I haven't traveled much of Australia. So I started seeing those things because I still needed that because my writing was becoming very, I don't want to say plain, but the juices just weren't flowing like they always would because I hadn't re-sparked anything for myself. So I agree with you. It's really important.
Yeah, and it can also, some of those experiences can be bloody terrifying. But then afterwards you're like, okay, that was good. I know how to do skydiving now. Let's not do that again, but I know how to do it.
I can totally agree. I always say curiosity almost killed the cat. And so now that I'm a little bit older and wiser, I'm like, Kaya, sometimes this doesn't always work out in your favor. And there have been situations that aren't the best. But I've always done that because I'm like, but I wonder what will happen because we as writers are always curious what might happen. Kids don't do this at home because it's not always the best thing to do. Um, so you're a gamer. What kind of games do you play? What are you into?
I play some RPGs, which is kind of sticking with it, right? And then I play milsim games, so like shooters and FPS kind of stuff. And I think that's just because of my background in the military, and I use that talk to a few friends that are from those time periods as well. And yeah, it's just an old skill set that I want to maintain, and it's also it allows me to think about it in books, right? So I'll actually use them of like especially with LitRPG books, I'm like, okay, well, I'm thinking about this scene and I want it to work out this way. Can I replicate that in a video game? And I die a lot doing very, very dumb things in video games. Thankfully, it's in video games, right? It allows you to go, I wonder if I just charge at this boar, it's going to be okay. No, it's not. But, you know, at least you discover those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What does then your day to day look like? Because it's a very obviously writing, you have to be very disciplined. So, what would you say your routine looks like, including gaming, of course?
It's very boring day to day. Which is, you know, it is what it is. It's about process refinement all the time, right? Of I wake up, sit down, start reading actually for a little bit because I find that I get interested in the book. Now, the problem is that I can't get too interested in the book. As soon as I start to think about something else, then I put down that book and I start writing. Usually, what I've done is the night before, I've actually written out the kind of scenes that I was thinking of that I wanted to write tomorrow, and I've done it in a pretty long format because then I can go like think about it actually while I'm sleeping, which I find helps me out, and then I can just write for the day. Um, you know, have breaks during that. You know, always get up and move around. I use Pomodoro, so it's 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. I use that with O-Write. It's a great application. It's web based and it has a timer that you can't stop or change, and that other people can see your word count. Makes you very self conscious when you don't write. Like I have been having that kind of day today, and I'm like, I need to put down more words, and then it's like it's just not happening. It's fun. And then I just my aim is to do 6,000 words a day, clear up the day like that, and then usually by the end of that, I'm like, I'm gonna go watch TV or read that book that I've been reading in those 5 minutes. between my 25 minutes. And then, yeah, that's pretty much Monday to Friday. And then throw in some meetings to go do administration stuff. And then, yeah, then it's the weekend. And I make sure I just have the weekends off because, especially like, like if you work all the time then and you don't have time off, then that's not healthy. And like while I am writing like throughout the day, it's not like I'm just writing throughout the day. It's like, yeah, I'll get up and I'll wander around. And even if not 25 minutes, I don't write, I'll be thinking about the book and wandering around the house. Maybe I'll be cleaning at the same time, especially if it's an editing kind of day. Because everyone, I don't know what happens. As soon as editing comes in, brooms and mops come out and vacuum cleaners start running around the house. It seems like every writer I talk to, I don't know if this happens to you.
That was me last week, actually. I finished editing the last book in one of my series, and I swear I found the dust particles on everything in this house you could imagine, because I was like, this is productive, but cleaning, I feel like, is actually the form of procrastination for any writer who just doesn't want to edit.
Yeah, no, it's the best, kind of procrastination ever because, everyone around you is like, "Oh, your house is really clean." You're like, "Yeah, I had to. It was a long book. Yeah, it was a long haul. It was like a week or so. I had to get through it and be done." Yeah.
So what are you working on at the moment then? Where are you at?
So I'm working on editing the Ten Realms and working on the Ten Realms. But I'm also tinkering with a couple of other projects. I don't do just the writing stuff. I'm also like working on like the whole side of okay, um, is there stuff that I do that I can bring to other authors? So like advertising on Amazon and such. I know that I've got a team that have worked on that really well and trying to turn that into a thing to bring to other authors because when we started out, there was some tools, but there's definitely been a large amount of them that have come out recently. But then even looking at the comparison between, how many tools we have compared to someone who's in Seller Central selling a product on Amazon, it can be very different. So I'm trying to work on bridging the gap there, which is also the fun of all of those meetings. But yeah, I'm working on 10 Realms, working on a series that's yet to be named. And then yeah, it's a heck of a lot of fun. What are you working on?
Oh my goodness, don't even ask. So many things. Yeah, I have a lot of squirrel projects at the moment. So obviously there is this. I do a weekly interview every week. I also have a podcast every Sunday. And we've just finished the last book in my Token Huntress series. So
Congratulations.
thank you. Bittersweet though, is very sad. My readers are going to hate me, but that's completely fine. But yeah, so the fifth book came out last week, 6 books off to the editor. So obviously transitioning that into coming out. And then I'm working on another 2 books that cannot be named. So lots to do, which is exciting. And I find this very interesting is that I find with authors who have been in it for a couple of years as well, they do want to create something where they can give back, such as like I've built this channel and you're obviously building a place where people can learn more about AMS ads and feel a lot more confident in it. And I think it says a lot about the community that we've surrounded ourselves with as well, because we found people who have supported us along the way. As I know that I have made poor investments, I have made poor relationships over the years. And then I've also learned to value the really good ones for those who have mentored me or taught me or given me knowledge. So I think that's really awesome that you're doing that.
Well, I think it's interesting of what you said. It is really a community aspect as well, right? Right. I doubt that anyone was thinking that when getting into writing. It's very much like an enclosed system, right? But there's a ton of people you can meet out there, some great friends that you can make within the writing world, and a lot of the people I've run into are writers are very much active on. I'm like they have nothing to hold back, right? They're like, well, this is what I've done. Maybe this will work for you. Like, because, one of my friends, James, says this, rising tides raise all ships. And I thought that was a really good way to think of it. And so, yeah, like at the end of the day, it'll be fun to see how people will use that to push forward, and not everyone will.
I want to know then, what would you say your 3 top marketing tips are?
Definitely see write the next book, right? Like it's the simplest one. You've probably heard it a million times, but it's the biggest advertisement. There's nothing else that'll put another product in front of everyone. There's nothing people will go crazy over more than the next thing. The second is really cultivate your fans. Always be connected to them. I've started to do more Facebook Lives with all of my fans, to the point where I was trying to do an interview with my narrator, and we were trying to figure out Facebook Live. So for people who don't know, Facebook Live, you could do with like streaming. It's complicated. I don't understand it. Or you could do on your phone. So the two of us were on our phones. Like I was had to make it, and then he comes in, and then I invite him. I did 3 tests, and in those 3 tests, people had figured out that we're going to be doing this interview thing because they started showing up. And so they'd snuck in there, and I was like, like I was like it was hilarious in the best way of just like we were in here like at like 2 in the afternoon. There's supposed to be no one around, and like people are just piling in. But yeah, no, it's great if like they're super connected. They're always interested to see what's going on. And I think it definitely, as you were saying, with the visual aspect that we have more access to nowadays, that's huge. So cultivate your fans. And third, always be reachable, maybe. That might sound odd, but like always have a way to connect to your fans how they want to be connected with. So like having, yeah, however you can reach them and they're comfortable with that, allow that to be how it is. Some fans really love to be engaged a lot. Some fans just want an email and saying, hey, this is out today. So yeah, cultivate those. But then also at the same time, trim is the thing, as you said, of like, don't have 20 different things. At most have 3 to 5. I think if you go beyond that, even if you have a team to support you, you're diluting yourself a little bit.
I think those are great tips, and it kind of comes back to the start and the core of where we start, and just making sure that you maintain that relationship with your readers, because we literally would not be where we are today without them. So it is important to find what engagement best works for you and for them, and that you can continue that discussion and get excited about what's coming out in the worlds that you're building, because you're taking them on that journey. So they kind of want to know who's behind the mask as well. So I think they're really good tips. I do want to know, this is my favorite question to ask. What is your dream? What is the goal that you were chasing for your writing career?
Can I just say I write a lot of books? Like, okay, so this is an interesting one. I looked at Isaac Asimov, and I think he has something like 100 published works or something like that. My aim is to beat that.
Okay.
But then also at the same time of like they're not also just in volume, but also taking the time of every single book to get better. Because yeah, I don't want to just churn out books. Well, I want to churn out books, but I want to make them good books. But and yeah, like I just saw that he had that number, and I was like, wow, that's crazy, that's impossible. And then I've started to do this, and now 7 years later, I'm like somewhere close to 35 books, and I'm like, okay, this is possible, but also I need to stop making books that are 300,000 words long and crazy. So I think if I do those 2 things, I'll be safe.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're already at 35, I think this is a very possible goal. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
So I tried out plotting, and like, okay, I have systems, but then I pantser, which sounds odd. Yeah.
No, that kind of sounds similar to how I write. I would
Okay.
love to be a plotter, but it doesn't work for me. So I have key point structures within my storyline, and then I'm like, right, where are we going, guys? Take me to point A, point B, and here's the ending. So Obviously, everyone writes differently. That is just what works for me.
I agree with that because that totally actually sounds like what I do. It's like, okay, so we have this really cool event. Let's get there. And then you're just like, you're along for the ride. And then you're just like, okay, we've got here. And then you have that like cool little moment. You're like, and there's something over in the distance over there. Let's go do that. It's a lot of fun because you get to live the story as well. But I think it's, everyone does in their own way. But I think for us, yeah, it's nice to find another person that's in a similar writing style, right?
I'm curious, and do you, I don't know how mean you are to your readers. I'm quite known for, because I write dark fantasy, so anything's on the table, basically. So
Yep.
I am one of those people who love to kill my characters. And there have been ones that I have not wanted to kill because I love them and I grow an attachment. But straight from the get-go, when you meet this character, I know they're going to die. But then I fall in love with them and I'm like, is there a way I can alter this? Can I keep them in? Like, can I? And no, there is a purpose to it. So I'm curious, do you do something similar? Are you along for the ride and then you're like, oh, they're dead, or you knew all along?
I didn't totally just do that yesterday. Yep.
Fabulous. So
I felt so bad, and I was like, okay, there's like the final thing, and I have dice that I use like occasionally for different questions where I'm like, I can't make a decision on this, and I rolled the dice, and it was exactly the decision that I've made before, so I'm gonna just have to follow this through, and then I did, and I was just like, whew, well, everyone's gonna hate this, but it's gonna be a great scene.
wow. Do you know you're the second author I've interviewed actually with the dice? I interviewed Christopher Mitchell. He is a Scottish author. He does
Hmm.
fantasy. And he said that he had actually structured randomly, like he has not guilds, but different sectors. And so he literally, I think it was rolling dice to figure out what sex they would be, who they were part of, like the characteristics. And I was like, wow, I don't know if I could credit to you.
No, it's if you come to some of those decisions, it can make it a lot easier because then it's like it's done, right? Because we've all had those periods as writers of like, okay, what should I do? Like, there's the story aspect, and the story aspect can go either way. It makes it a lot easier. I did have it for the 10 rounds where actually a lot of the big decisions were rolled on dice. So there is a title that I gave the characters. It was One Foot in the Grave, and it was literally because they were on the saving throw. And if they didn't get that, then they would have died on the dice. So like thankfully they did survive the entire book. Like not even me like adding in numbers or anything, but they very nearly did, like at least twice in like the first three books.
All right, I have a segment. This is our last segment. It's called Speed Dating with an Author. So you and I are going to go on a very romantic date. I lit a candle, I've created ambience, and it's basically 5 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
All right.
All right. What's the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
I jumped over a fence, landed on the other side, but because I didn't have my balance, I fell backwards into barbed wire, and I cut up my back and my neck. And uh, because we were kind of far out, instead of getting stitches, I just walked with it for a very long period of time. And essentially, I had it dressed up with tape we made it back, and then they were like, it's kind of already healed, so you're good to go.
I should really stop asking that question. but you still, I thought you were gonna be like, and then it got infected, and then this happened. I was gonna go die really quickly. Safe. All right. Just like, could have gone bad really fast. What are the best 3 words that would describe you? Well, you would use to describe yourself.
Stubborn, lazy, easygoing.
Okay, they're good qualities. What is the song that best describes you?
Okay, that's hard. Because like there's so many good songs. Like I don't know about anyone else, but I like listening to music while I write. Like it's all I do. I literally trained myself to do that because I was so bored not listening to anything. So had to learn how to do it. I don't know. Yeah.
Who are
Um,
some of your favorite bands or artists?
um, there's like stuff like Queen, there's Disturbed, there's ELO, there's oh god, like yeah, like all of the 80s. I'll just say like all of the 80s as well. Like yeah, no, it's hard. I would probably say like an 80s song. Um, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to answer that for sure. Yeah.
All right, I will take all of the above as the answer. What is, I'll take it. What is your life motto?
Nothing is impossible.
Oh, I love that. When did you get that?
So this is just in case. This is one of those things you learn of. You need to have this in mind at all times. So I've known that I would get a tattoo like this for several years. The thing was that when one very hungover, I think it was February, a couple of years back, my friend comes and she says, "Hey, it's my birthday. Let's go get a tattoo." And I go, "Oh, well, okay, it's your birthday, so we've got to go get a tattoo." So she got a tattoo, I got a tattoo. This was, I think, 3 years ago now. Hers is on the back of her neck. So I keep on reminding her, and I was like, you've got a tattoo on the back of your neck. She's like, oh, yeah, because she never sees it. So
Oh,
I'm just like, I understand it, but I'm just like, I just always have to bug her for it. Also, the most nerve-wracking thing to give someone else on like her birthday was, okay, make sure that it's lined up on my neck, especially with the bones there, because I knew that otherwise I was just going to be so screwed as a friend if I didn't line that up perfectly, because she would like know about it, and I was like, oh, okay, like let's get this figured out. So yeah, and now I'm going to be one of her bridesmaids in her wedding coming up.
amazing. How fun.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'm wearing a dress or a kilt or a suit, so we'll see.
Wear all of them, all three, create something
Yeah, it'll be one drunken mess by the end of it anyway.
naturally. Well, as soon
Yeah.
as you said killed, I knew it would be because I'm like, obviously, we're going with Scottish theme here. So they're always a bit of a party.
Oh yeah, well like it's also the safety net of the just in case, it's the nice medium, right?
Absolutely. What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not many people know about?
I don't know. I think at this point, like everyone knows a lot about me. Um,
Like secret banjo playing or
Not really. Like I'm good at writing, I hope. And then
we
and
all
then
hope.
oh God, yeah, like every day it's like this is bad, and then someone else says that's okay, and you're like, really? Really? Okay. I write in cursive and I use fountain pens. That's an odd thing that I do, I guess. But I used to do it in the UK, found it in Canada, and yeah, it's again a super nerdy thing that I like to do and enjoy. But yeah, otherwise everything, yeah, I think it's pretty much out there already.
I have had so much fun having you on here. What's coming up for you? Where do we stalk you? Tell us everything we need to know.
Oh, so we went with the rapid fire questions right into the stalking. Okay.
Right into
Um,
it went well. It was perfect. As soon as you said cursive writing, I was like, yep, need to stalk.
yeah, I'm all over Facebook. I'm all over Patreon at Chatfield Writes. You can find me on Amazon. I'm working on 10 Realms right now, and we're actually recording the Seventh Realm Part 2 audiobook right now. And we have the Seventh Realm Part 2 coming out sometime soon. I'm sorry for everyone that's heard that for like a while now, at least like a month. But hopefully gonna have some more information soon on those release dates. But yeah, that's all I've got going on. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, it absolutely has. Where also you said that you had a Facebook fan group. What is the name?
Mike Chatfield's awesome fan group.
Cool. So we will make sure to become a fan and avid reader. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Cheers. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
Cheers.